안녕하십니까. 저는 UN 미래 포럼의 박영숙입니다. 오늘은 토마스프레이 다빈치 연구소 소장님을 소개해 드리겠습니다. 이분은 IBM에서 15년간 근무하면서 260개의 혁신상을 받았습니다. 그리고 지금 구글이 선정한 최고의 미래학자, 전 세계 거의 1년에 8, 9개월을 돌아다니면서 미래학 강의를 하시는 분입니다. 토마스프레이 선생님을 초청하겠습니다.
Yeah, thanks for having me here today. It's a great honor. Every time I come to Korea, I get experiences that I've never gotten anywhere else in the world. And I find it to be a tremendous honor every time I get to share ideas with the great people of Korea here. There's a paper that I wrote not too long ago, and this is the most popular paper I've written. And the title of the paper is 10 Unanswerable Questions That Neither Science Nor Religion Can Answer. So I thought I would share some of these ideas with you as a way of kind of stretching your imagination and setting the stage for a few other topics that we're going to get into. So the first question I ask is this question of, why are there exceptions to every rule? I had somebody write in and argue with me on this topic, and they said, the fact that you've made a statement that there are exceptions to every rule is itself a rule that there's no exceptions to. But from my standpoint, it's actually the exception to all of the other rules. The second one is, why do logic and reason fail to explain that which is true? The third one, is the universe finite or infinite? What happens when we get to the edge of the universe? The fourth one, why does anything exist? Number 5, why does time exist? Number 6, why do humans matter? Number 7, why are humans so fallible? Number 8, do human accomplishments have long-term meaning? Number 9, why is the future unknowable? And the last one is, what is the purpose of death? Now, I start off with questions like this as a way of kind of stretching your thinking, because being a futurist is as much being a philosopher as it is being somebody who thinks and talks about the future. See, we're a very backward-looking society. We're backward-looking because it's just human nature. We've all personally experienced the past. As we look around us, we see evidence of the past all around us. All information that we come into contact with is essentially history. So the past is very knowable. At the same time, we're going to be spending the rest of our lives in the future. So it's almost as if we're walking backwards into the future. So my job as a futurist is to help turn people around, to give them some idea of what the future might hold. So how does the future get created? Well, the future gets created in the minds of everybody around us. We all participate in creating the future. Certainly some of us have more influence than others. But people make decisions today based on their understanding of what the future holds. So I use this phrase a lot, the future creates the present. Now this is just the opposite of what most people think. Most people think that what we're doing today is going to create the future, but from a little different perspective, it's these images that we hold in our head determine our actions today. So here's the key thing. If we change somebody's vision of the future, we change the way they start making decisions today. My goal is, by the time you finish watching this show, that I will change your vision of the future and you will make different decisions as a result of that. Let me switch gears here. I'm going to talk a little bit about an emerging technology called atmospheric water harvesters. For whatever reason, only of all the water on the surface of the earth, only about 2% of it is fresh water. And out of that, only about 25% of that is accessible to human beings. So the entire human race until now has survived on 0.5% of all the water on planet Earth. Atmospheric water harvesters are a technology for sucking moisture out of the air and providing fresh water to people anywhere on the planet. What I have on the screen here now is this is what's called a fog net that sucks moisture out of the air. This is an MIT project in Peru doing basically the same thing. A French designer came up with this design for something called the Warka water towers. This system will take about 100 liters a day out of the air, and it has changed the lives of lots of young ladies in Africa because they're the ones that have to haul all the water for the villages. They've even taught the villages how to take a 4-person team and build these themselves in about a week. Another French company has figured out how to use windmills to suck moisture out of the air. These windmills are being tested out in Abu Dhabi, and they're able to get around 500 liters a day, depending on the humidity, to provide fresh water in that country. A young inventor came up with this system. It's a solar-powered system called AirDrop, which sucks moisture out of the air and irrigates all the plants nearby. Now, the whole time people were working on this technology, the holy grail was for somebody to actually develop a self-filling water bottle. A few months ago, a company called Fontis developed this prototype for a self-filling water bottle that fits on a bicycle. And as you ride along, it fills up the water bottle. Let me show you a short video on how this works.
This is a water bottle that fills itself. It's called the Fontis, and it's supposed to be able to pull water out of the air as you ride a bike, filling up over the course of an hour. Fresh water is something we constantly take for granted. Of the over 7 billion people on Earth, 783 million don't have access to clean water. Even in the United States, areas like Flint, Michigan are struggling with water contamination. It's hoped that designs like the Fontis can, in some small way, help to combat these statistics. But pulling water out of the air is a slow process. The Fontis prototype produces about 17 ounces of water an hour. That's great for cyclists, but it's not going to solve a water crisis. The bottle's prototype doesn't filter out air pollution either, and that's something it'll need to do to truly provide access to clean water. Still, it's a starting point.
This is an example of a future technology that's going to change the world in lots of different ways. As the science fiction writer William Gibson says, the future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed. Now, what I've just shown you is an example of what I call a catalytic innovation. This is different than a disruptive innovation that disrupts existing industries. The catalytic innovations create entire new industries. Some examples of catalytic innovation in the past were things like electricity, automobiles, airplanes, telephones, photographs. All of these went on to create multi-billion-dollar industries. So here's the important thing. All industries are a bell curve. They have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And yes, all industries end. All the major industries we have today will be gone 1,000 years from now. The other important thing is that the most profitable industries today all tend to be in the second half of the bell curve. They're constantly having to do more with less. I'll give you an example of this. In the steel industry, projections are that we'll reach the peak demand for steel in the world around 2024. At this point, we will develop synthetic materials that can be used in place of steel, and the overall demand for steel will start to decline. There's a parallel bell curve of the employment in an industry, and the peak employment in the steel industry actually happened in the 1980s. At that point, we actually, in the United States, we had 3 times as many people working in the steel industry as we do today, but we're still producing far more steel. So the peak employment in an industry is actually a lead indicator as somewhere in the future, the overall demand for that goods or service will start to decline. So for the industries out here today, are the industries that you're working in, are they at the end of the bell curve? Or are they at the beginning of a new bell curve? A few months back, I made the prediction that by 2030, over 2 billion jobs are going to disappear. Now, when I made this prediction, it wasn't intended to be a doom or gloom statement. I wasn't telling the world that we were going to have 2 billion people unemployed. Rather, that this is going to force us to create new systems for creating new jobs at a faster rate than ever before. This was intended to be a wake-up call that we need to be doing a lot more for creating these new systems for reskilling people and preparing them for the future. This is not just the low-level jobs. Companies like Uber and Airbnb have actually figured out how to use software to automate out middle management jobs out of existence. Every year, I go to the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas. It's a big event where they have all of the new products that are being rolled out in the consumer electronics industry. I have a friend of mine who comes back from that show every year, and he always says the same thing. He says, yeah, but there was nothing new, which means that he didn't see anything all that exciting. The products were just a little bit better than the year before. In a lot of ways, that's a true statement, because the thousands of televisions that they have there, every year they're a little bit flatter, they're a little bit bigger, a little bit more curved, they have more downloadable apps, better battery life, a little bit brighter. All of them have changed just a little bit, but not a lot. When you look at televisions from one year to the next, you don't see much change. But if you would compare today's televisions to the ones 15 years ago, you would notice a huge change. For this reason, I talk about the essential role of the iterators being more valuable than the innovators. Whenever somebody develops a truly novel, something brand new that's totally not been seen before, that's real innovative, we have to work our way through the really crappy stages of that before we get to something that's useful. So as we look at changes happening around the world, we have to look in terms of exponential growth because things are changing so quickly. So as an example, the solar power industry is doubling its output every 2 years. So even though the total amount of power generated by solar is still very small, it's only 2% of the total amount of power generated for the world. Within 12 years, with the exponential growth pattern, it will actually dominate the world as far as generating power. So as we transition from physical products to digital products, the growth curve starts to take on this exponential growth pattern. We're switching from physical cars to digital cars. And by the way, if somebody owns a Tesla car, Tesla offers a free download every month to upgrade your car. So part of their sales pitch is that if after a year you actually own a better car than when you first bought it. We're moving from physical homes to smart homes. We're moving from physical cities to smart cities. So as digital technology enters our lives in a bigger way, the changes will start happening exponentially faster. To give you an example of rapid scalability, I'll go through this list here, but McDonald's, it took them 23 years to sell the first billion hamburgers. Facebook, it took them 8.5 years to reach the first billion users. It took Uber 5.5 years to sell the first billion rides on Uber. Uber has a competitor in China called Didi Kuwati, and it only took them 11 months to reach the first billion rides. Now, he was the first one, and this is in 2012. Since then, there's been 21 YouTube stars that have exceeded 1 billion downloads, with the new record being set by Adele in just 87 days. So this idea is really important because if you're in business, you can have a competitor come out of the woodwork, and in maybe 2 or 3 weeks, they can already have 10 million users and be a fierce competitor. So on one hand, we're eliminating lots of jobs, but on the other hand, we're freeing up human capital. So just because our jobs disappear doesn't mean we run out of work to do in the world. That's fairly ludicrous. I mean, there's lots of work left to do in the world. So even though there's lots of work left to do in the world, we may not have jobs lined up for the work that needs to be done. So we're going to have some gaps, and that creates challenges. What's changing is that we can now think faster, know faster, and do faster than ever before in history. So where will our next generation jobs come from? Well, the answer is they will come from future industries. So I'm just going to touch real quick on some of the future industries, including the Internet of Things, the trillion sensor movement, 3D printing, contour crafting, virtual reality, flying drones, driverless cars, and micro colleges. Let's start with the Internet of Things. The Internet of Things is permeating virtually every aspect of life as we build a digital infrastructure over everything physical in the world. The Internet of Things started somewhere between 2008 and 2009. That's when the company Cisco actually noticed that the number of devices connected to the Internet started to exceed the number of people on Earth. 6.8 billion people, 6.8 billion devices. The projections are that we're going to reach 50 billion things connected to the Internet by 2020. So we're asking a lot of what are all these things? In addition to things being connected to the Internet, there's lots of sensors being created. And 3 years ago, there was an event called the Trillion Sensor Summit that was held in San Francisco. At this event, they were putting together a roadmap as to how long it would take before we get to 1 trillion sensors in the world. And they concluded it would be somewhere between 2022 and 2024. And by 2036, we will have 100 trillion sensors in the world. So right now, the number of sensors on smartphones is somewhere between 19 and 20. And when smartphones first came out, they only had 5. So the number of sensors on smartphones is doubling every 4 years. So this means that within 12 years, that we will have 160 sensors on every smartphone, and that with 3 billion smartphones projected to be sold on an annual basis, that means we're going to have 480 billion sensors being sold on an annual basis starting just 12 years from now. So as a result of all of this work, innovation's being parsed into far smaller pieces. That means that every one of us can participate in creating the future. There's a category of changes with the Internet of Things called enchanted objects, and these are things that have kind of magical properties. I'll just mention a few of these. The first one is the Amazon trash can. So when you throw something away in this trash can, it automatically scans the item and it reorders it from Amazon. The MemoMe Smart Mirror actually remembers what you wore in the last outfit you tried on, so you can compare outfits from one to the next. The Vitality Glow Cap is one that will alert you when it's time to take your medicine. So it will first alert you by flashing a light at the top, and if you don't take your pills, then it will actually start beeping, and if you still don't take your pills, it'll start sending you text messages. The biometric coffee maker is a very smart device. You put your hand on it and it knows exactly how much caffeine should go in your coffee. The Flying Nixie camera looks like just a device on like a watch, but all you have to do is unlatch it and it folds out into a flying drone, and then you throw it and it suddenly you can throw it and it goes out like a frisbee and spies on your neighbors. And the Pinto Feed pet feeder is designed so that when you're feeding your pets at home, that you can FaceTime them and talk to them while they're eating. All right, let's switch gears and talk about 3D printing. At the Consumer Electronics Show last year, the first booth that we went to, they had us sit down and they scanned the inside of our ears. They proceeded to use the 3D printer to create these earbuds so I could listen to music, and they fit perfectly in my ear. This technology will radically change the way hearing aids are designed. The last time I was in Korea, Youngsuk took me to a shopping center where they had me stand in this photo booth, and they had me pose, and then they proceeded to 3D print a little statue of me about that tall. Charles Hull is the guy who started the 3D printing industry back in the early 1980s, printing with things like acrylic and plastics, but now we have over several hundred different materials to print with. We can now print things with wood fiber called smart wood, We can print things with macadamia nut shells and even instant iced tea. We can print things in smartwood. We can create things that are impossible to create with the old traditional methods. This is a wall that's actually printed from sand, and it has very interesting heating and cooling properties. Carnegie Mellon University and the Disney Corporation have figured out how to 3D print with wool, and they're actually able to 3D print entire teddy bears now. Imagine going into a clothing store 10 years from now, and the first thing you do is you step into a body scanner. And while you're getting your body scanned, you pick out whatever styles, colors, and fashions you're interested in. So these are examples of dresses that have been 3D printed, much more complicated and sophisticated than anything we can make with needles and thread today. You can see from this video that they've improved these fabrics in dramatic ways. And this is a fashion show that was recently conducted with all 3D printed clothing. But it's not just your clothing, it's also your shoes. I don't know anybody that doesn't have problems with their feet. So imagine having your feet scanned and having the shoes fit perfectly when you first try them on. Not only can you print your own shoes, you can actually design your clothes, design your shoes to fit your personality. You can do things with them that are impossible to do today, and every shoe is going to match the things that you like. Contour crafting is a form of 3D printing, only it's printing with concrete and actually building buildings with it. As you can see, this is putting layer upon layer of concrete to actually construct an entire building. A Chinese company a few months back announced that they were able to 3D print 10 houses in one day. This company called Winsun, they were the first in the world to actually 3D print an entire house. And then a few months back, they announced that they had 3D printed an entire mansion and also a 4-story building. So this is what people are imagining a 3D printed house setup was going to look like, where you set up a rig around a construction site and then you print the entire house in a single day. As printing technology gets more sophisticated, you're not just printing the structure, you're also printing the wiring in the walls, the plumbing in the walls, the cabinets in the kitchen, the toilets and the sinks, all of these things all printed together. In fact, if you get tired of the house you're living in, all you have to do is grind it up and reprint it. This is radically going to change the entire construction industry. But there's probably an interim step before we go to that, and we'll probably be printing 3D printed bricks and then having machines put the bricks in place. I'm showing this animation here of an Australian company that's figured out how to automate the bricklaying process. And if you see the way this works, these bricks go onto the system, and it takes the bricks individually out to the end of the construction area, and it places them one at a time very quickly, and you construct your building. So this is all laser controlled, so everything gets put into place, so it's all very exact. So these are pictures of the actual machine, and the key thing about this is that this is a very sophisticated piece of equipment that can lay 1,000 bricks an hour. Once we're able to actually print our walls, there's no longer a need for flat walls. Every wall can become an artistic centerpiece. Architects are going to love this because they can create free-form structures that they're unable to create with any other construction methods today. Our very definition of what a home is, what an office is, what a condo is, all of these things are going to change along with these construction methods. 3D printing is also being used in different bio areas. This is an example of a guy 3D printing a vein for surgery. Professor Lee Cronin from the University of Glasgow believes that we're going to be able to 3D print all of our pharmaceutical drugs, all of our pills. So today, doctors are able to prescribe pills that are 200 milligrams or 400 milligrams, when the ideal dosage for you might be 148 milligrams or 357 milligrams. We're not able to work with that level of precision yet, but this is a process that could change all that. This is a company in Belgium that already makes a 3D pill printer. It doesn't work the way Lee Cronin had described it, but they already print pills, but they also print the packaging for the pills as well. We're also getting into printing organs, and this is going to take a while, but on the right is the example of 3D printed bladders and then kidneys and also an ear. Virtual reality is finally becoming something that's a very big industry. This is a form of virtual reality therapy, and they're using it for people that have suffered a traumatic injury. It enables you to actually go skydiving without jumping out of a plane. It enables young children to experience what it's like walking through ancient times in Greece or Egypt and get a sense as to what it was like living in those periods. I love this one because there's a fan in the front and it actually gives you the feel that you're flying, and so you can flap your wings and actually fly. Virtual reality is changing how we view the world, and there's so many capabilities that are going to come to life with this technology. We can point at things and we can get information off of it. We can move things around and shift things, and it's going to dramatically change the way we do business. I'll switch gears to flying drones here. Drones are going to affect all of our lives. This is the latest design for a drone that Amazon's going to use to deliver packages to a home. But it has quite a few problems in that it only can handle about 2 kilograms. I wrote a column on this topic of 37 critical problems that we're going to run into with drone delivery. And it has to do with creating automated systems and creating ways of understanding where to deliver packages, having crowded skies, even the durability of these systems. It hasn't been defined yet. So while the flying drones are going to have a lot of challenges, ground-based delivery drones are much more likely. And so having a drone that can actually deliver a package to your home and actually send you a text message that it's being delivered, and it can practically just hand you the package, we're going to see a lot of this in the future. As I mentioned, drones are going to affect all of us, and we're going to reach the first billion drones in the world somewhere between 2030 and 2032. So it's important to keep in mind that drones are not just flying in the air. Drones can also roll along the ground. They can also stick to the side of a building. They can actually float in a river. They can climb a tree. They can also attach themselves like parasites to the sides of trains and ships and airplanes. Most of the drones that we see coming out in the future are going to have multiple capabilities, and so they'll be able to do lots of different things. I'll shift gears again to driverless vehicles. This is going to make driving a thing of the past. One of my recent papers, I talk about 128 things that are going to disappear in the driverless car era. Driverless cars are going to take all the work out of traveling from one place to another. But in doing so, as they automate our transportation, they actually change the way we think about the world. So there's going to be lots of jobs that disappear. Taxi drivers, delivery jobs, bus drivers, truck drivers, chauffeur, limo drivers. All of these are going to go away. All the auto sales, we won't own our own cars anymore. Account managers, auto auctions, credit managers, insurance for cars is going to go away, including claims adjusters, even crash testers. Keep in mind, this transition will take 2 to 3 decades for this to happen, but it's going to be quite a transition. Gas stations will go away, car washes, detail shops, tire shops, brake shops, alignment shops, all of these are going to go away. Parking lots are going to go away, parking garages, valet services, parking meters, charging stations, handicap spots. all of these are going away. Everything from roadside assistants to tow trucks to locksmiths for cars and auto paint stores. So I like to ask this question of how long will it be before your car is actually smarter than you are? We're introducing on-demand transportation. So if you can imagine stepping out in front of your house 10 years from now, punching into your smartphone, I want to go shopping, I want to go to school, I want to go to work. A vehicle comes and picks you up, takes you to where you want to go, and from there it picks somebody else up and takes them to where they want to go. This is on-demand transportation. This changes the way we travel across cities, and there are currently over 30 car companies around the world working on driverless vehicles today. So this is a picture of me. A couple years back, I was in Istanbul talking about the idea of teacherless education. After my talk, one of the executives from Google came up to me that was sitting in the audience, and he says, we're very interested in teacher education, teacherless education, because we want to educate Africa, and teachers don't want to go to Africa. So this was a very revealing moment for me, because no, teachers don't want to go to Africa. In fact, there's lots of places teachers don't want to go in the world. In fact, we have a teacher shortage of about 18 million teachers globally, and a full 23% of all kids growing up in the world currently don't even attend any school whatsoever. In fact, if we continue to have to insert a teacher between us and everything we need to know in the future, we cannot possibly learn fast enough for the demands of the future. So Clayton Christensen, the Harvard professor who's been studying this, he says by 2019, half of all K through 12 classes are going to be taught online. What he's talking about is this type of setup where young people will be able to jack in and figure out what courses they want to take that are of interest to them and work at their own pace until they complete those courses. So the role of education is changing. It's no longer possible to predict the educational needs of business 4 to 5 years in advance. So let me help define the problem here. We need to prepare students for jobs that don't exist, using technology that hasn't been invented to solve problems that we don't even know are problems yet. So we need to rapidly reskill people for the jobs of the future. Facebook bought Oculus Rift in March of 2014 for $2 billion. And once they did that, there was this instant uptick in the demand for virtual reality designers, coders, and engineers. And nobody was teaching it at that time. And even if they had some virtual reality classes, they certainly weren't teaching the Oculus Rift version. So bold companies are instantly triggering the need for talented people with skills aligned to grow with cutting-edge industries. So at the DaVinci Institute, we're exploring the idea of what we call micro colleges. These are colleges that teach new skills in 2 to 3 months, and people who need to shift gears in their life can do it real quickly. So we've projected out that by 2030, the average person entering the workforce then will have to plan to reboot their career 6 times throughout their life. So to explain what a micro college is, it's an immersive form of post-secondary education done in a short period of time. It's just that simple. So since we can't predict the needs of business that far in advance, micro colleges are a responsive framework for creating talent pools to meet this fluid demands of business. So I predicted that by 2030, over half of all traditional colleges will disappear. Depending on the demands of the business world, that might be sooner or later than then, but there's going to be lots of pressure on traditional colleges. So we run a school called DaVinci Coders, and it's designed to train computer programmers. And they come in, and it's 11 to 13 weeks, depending on the course. We have 5 courses that we're teaching, and people are transitioning from jobs of being waitresses and bartenders to becoming software engineers. At the end of the course, everybody gets a certificate, and we've actually been experimenting with something called micro degrees, something that's a little bit more prestigious if you take 2 of the courses based on 1,000 hours of learning. We've been playing around with the idea if you have several micro degrees, then you can get a micro PhD. So we envision micro colleges going off in lots of different directions, including things like designing parts for 3D printers, crowdfunding, becoming a dog breeder, a brewmaster, a drone pilot, an aquaponics farmer. All of these things are options for micro colleges in the future. So the future is ours to write. I'm going to leave you with a few predictions here. The next major league sport will be video games. This is already a huge industry, and it's catching on all over the world. Our most valuable land in the future is going to be our landfills. That's where we put all of our raw materials. We throw it all away. And this is going to be the most valuable land in the future because we're going to figure out how to build artificial earthworms to go through and mine all this. The Internet of Things will virtually eliminate theft because we can actually put tags on things of any value, and we know where all of these things are at any time. Driverless cars are going to change transportation more dramatically than the invention of the automobile itself. By 2030, the average person will own printed clothing, live in a printed house, have packages delivered by drones, own more than one robot, work as a freelancer, frequently use a driverless car, and will be capable of accomplishing 10 times of what the average person today can. We're entering an unprecedented opportunity. The reason this period is so important is because humanity is going to change more in the next 20 years than in all human history. At the same time, risk factors are going to increase exponentially because lots of things can go wrong. And our children's children who haven't even been born yet are counting on you, the people in this room. As Steve Jobs says, right now is one of those moments when you are influencing the future. So any of you that would like more information about what we do at the DaVinci Institute, feel free to sign up for our free newsletter, our Future Trends Report, and I thank you very much for having me here today.
We believe that a fundamental change in human consciousness and social relations through intensive meditation practice is needed to digest or take in the new technologies and enjoy them and the innovations of the future. So what do you think about that?
There's lots of interesting techniques that will be needed to adapt to all the new technology. I'm not sure that's the only system for doing it, but as we get culturally acclimated to all this new technology, there'll be a lot of challenges along the way. So figuring that out, I think, is there's huge opportunity in doing that. Yeah.
I was also wondering, you talk a lot about the future of technology and the industry, but do you see any future in the religious community?
Religion is not going away.
Yeah.
It will always be with us. In the United States, we have a lot of kind of butting of heads between science and religion, or who's correct and who isn't correct and all that. I think that will continue for many, many centuries. We have, I think humanity is hardwired to have a spiritual side. And so I think that it will always be part of who we are.
존 나이스비치가 쓴 메가트렌드 2011이라는 책에서 보면은 인간의 영성혁명에 대해서 얘기를 했었는데요. 지금 이제 벌써 10년 이상이 지나서 2016년이 됐는데 지금 이제 해외에서 존 나이스비치가 말한 영성혁명이 혹시 어느 정도로 진행되고 있는지 혹시 아시는 바가 있으면은 좀 조언 좀 부탁드리겠습니다.
There's an encyclopedia of religion that came out that has 9,800 different religions listed in it, of which there's just a few of the dominant ones that most of us hear about. Now, the idea of making predictions is not necessarily about how accurate you are with the predictions. It's about how much you cause people to think about that and come to their own conclusions. So if I make a prediction about 2030 or 2050, the value isn't, because every time we predict something that's really accurate, and by the time we get there, it just feels different. And so there's lots of contextual things that start to change at the same time. So making predictions about the future is intended to help force everybody to think more about that. And that changes kind of our consciousness. Now, as far as what John Nesbitt was talking about in Megatrends, then I'm not familiar with that section right at the moment. It's been a long time since I read that book, but there is, in my mind, a great value in forcing people to think about things that they normally wouldn't.
From the beginning, you introduced 10 unanswered and unsolved questions. And I just wonder, do you find anyone the solution about that question by yourself? About 10 unanswered questions. It's like just, why is the time exist? That is just, I also wonder about that.
Yeah, the reason I wrote that column is because I was having lots of anxiety over these things, and I thought, well, I actually need to post these somewhere and see what kind of a response I get from the rest of the world. And I was kind of amazed at how many people spent enormous amounts of time trying to answer all of those 10 questions. But in my mind, nobody completely answered them, and they still, in my mind, remain unanswered. And in so many ways, I don't think there's answers for them. But it helps me at least frame some of my thinking about the challenges ahead. We have lots of people who we get the impression growing up that the scientists out there have answers to everything. And actually what we figured out is such a small piece of the whole big picture. And this was an attempt to actually show us how little we know in the overall scheme of things.
토마스 프레이 선생님이 지금 덴버에서 한국에 방문하셨고 오늘 여러분에게 이렇게 재미있는 미래에 관한 이야기를 해주셨습니다. 우리 다 같이 감사의 마음으로 박수 한번 치는 걸로 강연을 마치겠습니다. 감사합니다.